Shri Krishna. Shri Radha Krishna Gopala Sam Radha Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Navadvip Dham ki jai, Ganga Mai ki jai, Jamuna Mai ki jai, Guru Dwarka Dham ki jai, Swami Bhaktivinoda ki jai, all glories to that, all glories to that. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
If you're trying to lose.
I hope everyone can see my screen and can hear me properly.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, good. Hare Krishna. And I have started the recording. Okay. So before we begin, I just wanted to mention I do owe uploading the lectures or the classes from last 2 weeks. So right after this class, I'll upload it along with today's class. So I'll just get all of them done today. And so in regard to today's class, I recall, I believe we completed through verse 61. Did we do 61? Or did we do only through 60?
We completed 61.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so we will continue from verse number 62. So this is the ongoing theme. So we completed the 3 themes in the second chapter, the 3 themes of Krishna's response to Arjuna. The first theme being the analytical study of the soul, its comparison and how it's different from the body. The second theme was basically practical considerations about how the society would perceive Arjuna's actions, and they would not be able to appreciate that Arjuna didn't want to fight out of compassion. They would just simply consider him as a coward. And so Krishna provides a series of arguments. So it's kind of not a major theme, but definitely kind of a sub-theme within there. And the third theme was Krishna is explaining Arjuna to perform his duties without any material motivation, and explains the real purpose of the Vedas. So having concluded that conversation, Arjuna is then curious to know, okay, I mean, there's, most people, they are materially motivated. So if somebody who is self-realized and is not acting for fruity reasons, what is the behavior of such a person? How does he walk? How does he sit? How does he talk? And in response to that question, Krishna provides further explanations about how such a person can remain steady. His mind is not disturbed, because he says that ultimately the purpose of all the prescribed duties, right, is ultimately to be able to control mind, right? And one who can control the desire for sense gratification, which is coming from the mind, mental concoction. So ultimately the mind has to be purified. One who is not disturbed in the mind even amidst threefold miseries. So we talked about that. So the way we can tolerate threefold miseries is, first of all, one needs to learn how to tolerate happiness. Because happiness and distress are the two sides of the same coin. Then we talked about, again, same on the same theme, one who is able to withdraw the senses from the sense objects, just like a tortoise, right? Such a person can be firmly fixed in steady consciousness or perfect consciousness. Yeah. So initially one might have to physically restrain the senses from the sense objects, but that is just a temporary way to brings things under control, but it's not sustainable in the long term. Why? Because Krishna then further explains that the one who is still contemplating on the objects of senses, right? So the senses are not indulging in sense gratification, but the mind is still contemplating. Right? So we will talk about that. But I think he also mentions this earlier, where he's saying, yeah, here, sorry, this is what I meant, that the taste for the sense gratification remains, right? So one might be able to physically restrain the senses from the sense objects, but the taste remains, right? So that's why that physical restraint can only be so much effective. That's why it is generally known that when one artificially tries to suppress the impulses of the senses, they might be able to do that for some time, but when their control eventually breaks, right, then there's a deluge. They overindulge. Just like a spring, when you suppress it, one has to apply a lot of force, but then you can continue to apply that force only for so long, and ultimately what will happen, as soon as you release the pressure, the spring actually just springs right back up, maybe even with more force. The same concept applies. So what's the solution? Well, one has to experience a higher taste, right? So artificial suppression can only go so long, but when the senses are engaged in something that is of a higher taste, then one can be fixed. Just like a child who is impetuous, has a lot of energy, and we can we cannot ask the child to be situated in one place. Don't jump, don't break things, just remain steady. It's not possible. But the child can be engaged in something positive, and slowly the child would develop a higher taste. So if the child likes to push the table around or things like that, hey, put that energy in some useful work. Maybe I have a laundry basket which is full of clothes, and I need to take it out of the laundry room and bring it to my bedroom, and I might ask the child to push it. So it's still fun for the child, but now the child also has a sense of accomplishment, that hey, I did something positive, and then he learns how to use the energy in service, and he knows like, okay, I'm doing something useful and still a fun. So that is possible and it is sustainable. It's the same thing. We have to cultivate our senses and engage them in a positive, higher engagement, not artificially try to suppress it. Because what happens is its senses are so strong and impetuous that even learned men who can discriminate between what is good and what is bad can be overcome by the impulses of the senses. Okay, so this is the discussion so far. So having said that, we will continue. So the next theme is about anger, and I think somebody was asking the question last time. I believe it was Maulik. He's not here yet. But I will continue with the conversation. So how does one control anger? And I briefly described that. Well, all emotions, generally the impersonalist idea, again, why they are called impersonalists, because they don't like the idea of someone having a personality, because with personality comes emotions. And there are positive set of emotions and there are negative set, what is perceived as a negative set of emotions, and like, hey, this is, we cannot deal with it. They already had too much negative experience of a certain range of emotions, and so they try to negate the existence of a personality. But the Krishna conscious perspective is that, well, all emotions have importance, all emotions have value, and even anger can be has a value as long as we don't allow those emotions to overpower us. I gave example of Hanuman, who he was not overpowered by anger when he was in Lanka. So while he was burning Lanka, he definitely, without anger, you cannot do, you cannot engage in a warfare, right? But he did not lose discrimination while he was burning Lanka. He had an objective in mind. I want to assess the strength of the enemy so that I can bring that intelligence back to Lord Rama, and so he can come up with a strategy of how strong the enemy is, how to fight. And then also at the same time, he made sure that Vibhishan, who is the brother of Ravana, is a devotee of Lord Rama. He did not burn his house. He burned the entire Lanka. He did not burn Ashok Vatika, where Mother Sita was staying, right? So what does it mean? He was in control of his anger. He was not overpowered by his anger. Similarly, as parents, we might have to show sometimes anger, but a good parent does show anger in order to control the child or teach a lesson, but the parent is not overcome by anger. Otherwise, the parent might hurt the child in a very bad way, right? So that's not a good display. So one must be in control of one's emotions. In that case, all emotions have a value, right? So there is no such thing as negative emotions. Everything except envy can be engaged in the service of the Lord. But envy has no service, especially in devotion. The whole idea of devotion is that a pure devotee thinks that, well, everyone is better than oneself. All other devotees are better than him or her, and then one does not envy what others have, right? Whatever we have, we engage in the service. So envy does not have any utility, otherwise all emotions have utility. Okay, so having said that, let's
I had a question, Prabhuji. Can I ask now or should I wait for later?
yeah, yes, please.
So Prabhuji, we discussed earlier that everything that we have is in some way also something that Lord Krishna also has.
Yes.
So if we have envy, which means then Lord Krishna might also be having envy for whatever reason. But so how do we then understand this? Like if envy has no use in any spiritual progress, then how is Lord Krishna using it, or how is that being manifested in any
Right,
way?
it's a very good question. I'll try to attempt to answer that. So in Krishna Leela, the place where we find some utility, and again, this is in pure devotees, they are that envy is under the control of Yoga Maya. So there are two kinds of Mayas. Maya means illusion. The material world, the illusion is Mahamaya. So that's Durga. Durga Devi, she is in charge. So the job of Mahamaya is to make us forget who Krishna is. Why? So that we can continue to indulge in sense gratification, because the conditioned soul came to this world in order to enjoy. If the soul really knows its position, that the soul is subservient to Krishna, Krishna is Supreme Personality of Godhead, if it knows, then it cannot enjoy, right? Now there is opportunity for soul to voluntarily cultivate that knowledge, but by default, the situation in this material world is that the soul, the first layer of covering on the soul is that of aham, ego, me, I, mine, right? I want to enjoy independently. And once that ego is there, then the next layer of intelligence, mind, and the senses, all those are the subsequent layers. In spiritual world, there is a yoga maya. Yoga means linking. So in spiritual world also, the yoga maya makes the devotees forget that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so why they make them, well, the reason why they make them forget is that so that there is an exchange of emotions in the five moods, either as a neutral relationship, or as a servant, or as a friend, or as a parent, or as a conjugal lover. Because as long as the devotee thinks that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then what happens, right? The mood is that of awe and reverence. Just like Vaikuntha, the mood is that of awe and reverence. So everyone worships Vishnu as a supreme, right? So that is also part of spiritual world. But the mood is that of Dashyaras, servitorship. But in Goloka Vrindavan and in other, especially in Goloka Vrindavan, all five, so Goloka Vrindavan is another part of the spiritual world, where all the five rasas are fully manifested. So for friendship to manifest, the friend has to forget that Krishna is the supreme God, right? Then only this is just my friend. The parent has to forget that Krishna is Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda Maiya. They have to forget that Krishna is God, so that they can think of him as a helpless baby, right? And then they serve him. So in this way, Yoga Maya makes everyone forget, so that the situation is created by which devotees can lovingly exchange service and emotions towards the Supreme God. So similarly, in the conjugal pastimes of Krishna, right, with the gopis or the young damsels of Vraja, so for those pastimes to manifest, all the gopis are again pure devotees of the Lord, but just sometimes to increase the love, just like a lover who is very attached to the beloved is very possessive, right? And because of that possession, if he sees that one's beloved is interested in someone else, right, then there is a feeling of jealousy or envy. And when that feeling arises, then the individual might think of what I should do, what is in that that's lacking in me, right? And it kind of creates a transcendental competition. I mean, material world, also this exists, but it generally takes a very ghastly form, right? So that is lust. But in spiritual world, again, these situations are created by Yoga Maya, where sometimes for Krishna, the most beloved for him is Radharani. Radharani is direct expansion of Krishna. Krishna expanded, his energies into a form. So, right. So we should not think, the same concept of lust which we see in this material world does not apply there. But in order to enhance the love of Radharani for Krishna, the Yoga Maya sometimes creates its situation where Radharani is, feels jealousy if Krishna is associating with some other gopi, right? So just to create that mood of, to make that exchange of love and emotions more intense, the Yoga Maya arranges for such feelings to manifest. So we especially see that in the conjugal pastimes of Krishna. So does that answer your question? Nitin?
Oh,
Prabhu?
yes, Prabhuji. I don't know if I was muted. Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did not hear it. Okay. So yeah, that was a good question. But yeah, for conditioned souls, what it's meant is that, see, while we are trying to make progress in our conditional stage, we can engage anger also in the service of the Lord. It is possible, right? But we are not in the same stage as the young damsels of Vraja who are, situated in pure love for Krishna. We are not under the control of Yog Maya, who makes all these feelings appear. So for our purposes, in our sadhana stage, when we are trying to practice devotional service, we are not able to apply envy in any way. So that is not applicable to us in our current state. That's I think that's a better way to say that. While other emotions, we are still able to engage in Krishna's service even in our conditioned state. While envy is something that only manifests in certain scenarios in spiritual world, and that also has a purpose. So that's the proper way to look at it. Yeah, there is another question, Parul.
Yeah, so in my past reading, so we've talked about like two camps of gopis, right? Like there's Chandravali and then there's Radharani, right?
Yes.
And in one of the book, and I can't remember where, but there was a discussion about the envy and the emotion of envy and having two camps of gopi and one being the envious of the other, right? And how the focus on Krishna consciousness is what allows both of them to coexist. So
Yes.
I was just kind of curious on if you could talk a little bit about that, because I don't remember the whole discussion. I read it a long time ago.
So how do they coexist?
Yeah.
I think that's the question. Yeah, so the two things that what we first of all needs to understand the two camps of the gopis. So one camp of gopis is Radharani. So Radharani and the other camp of gopis is led by Chandravali. So Chandravali is right-wing gopi. That means he is conservative, and I'll explain in a moment what that means. And the left-wing gopis are led by Radharani. So she is more liberal. And this is a liberal attitude of Radharani that gives more pleasure to Krishna than Chandravali. And I'll explain that as well in a bit. So what I mean by conservative is that right wing. So, that's why the idea in this, we politics, we see left wing, right wing, conservatives and liberals. So ultimately that is also coming from spiritual world. So Vamapanthi, so the liberals. So the liberals, again, in the spiritual world, they have an upper hand. So the conservative, Chandravali, is of the opinion, because he follows the mindset of what is the restrictions in the scriptures which are provided and how a lady should behave. So, she thinks, though sometimes she is not happy with Krishna, or if she has some sort of complaint, she would always be submissive. She would never challenge Krishna. She would always keep her tone low. Sometimes if Krishna is going to meet him, she would say that I'm really upset with Krishna, I'm not going to listen to him today. But as soon as Krishna comes, she would not directly insult him or fight with him, and she would be very submissive. And the main problem that Chandravali has is that she has with Radharani, is because Radharani is not like that. She is liberal. And Radharani would not hesitate to, taunt Krishna, or, pick a fight with him or challenge him. And, so Radharani is not constrained by what is considered as an expected norms that within which, a lady should behave. And so Chandravali is more upset. She is not upset so much that Krishna is associating with Radharani, but she even gets there is some of that there. But what she is like, how can Radharani talk like this to Krishna? Who does she think who she is like that? So that's one dimension over there. And in case of Radharani, of course, she knows that Krishna, she definitely does not like when, Krishna is associating with Chandravali. There are some pastimes where even Lalita, Vishaka, who are, her associates, Radharani's associates, and helping her in her service to Krishna. And by arrangement of Yog Maya, Krishna is sometimes associating with Lalita and Vishaka, and that makes Radharani a little envious and jealous. In terms of how they coexist is, when, unless Krishna wants to, the Yogmaya arranges for certain pastimes where Krishna is, exclusively associating with one of the gopis, and it creates a situation of jealousy or envy. Krishna is able to expand himself into innumerable forms. So there are millions of gopis in the spiritual world, in Goloka Vrindavan. And as exhibited in Krishna's earthly pastimes in Vrindavan, in Sharat Poonam, when Krishna actually performs his Rasa Leela dance. And again, millions of gopis, and Krishna expanded into millions of forms, and he's able to associate with all the gopis, and because all of them are in that conjugal mood, and Krishna can satisfy the mood and the desire of his devotees without any constraints. But still, in order to exhibit his special love for Radharani, there is Bhagavatam describes that there is a time where Krishna actually, disappears from Rasa Leela. And all the gopis are surprised. First they thought, actually, when Krishna had expanded to millions of forms, each gopi thought that Krishna is not dancing with anyone else. They are not able to see Krishna in his other expansion. They are thinking Krishna is only exclusively with me. But then eventually, they realize that Krishna has left Rasa Leela, and now they are wondering, where did Krishna go? They started talking with trees and the bushes, and where is Krishna there? And and they started seeing some footprints. And they saw two sets of footprints. Oh, Krishna ran away. It's, looks like he's with another gopi. Who is that another gopi? And then, they notice that, from this point, only one set of footsteps are there. That means Krishna would have lifted that gopi at this location. So in that way, they're thinking like that. So anyway, that's Krishna. Bhagavatam does not directly describe the name of that gopi, Radharani, because that's very confidential pastimes of Krishna with Radharani. It's not accessible to conditioned souls. But there are other indirect references. The word Aradhya is used, in that it's referring that reference to that special gopi. So in this way, the love for Krishna for Radharani is, that is incomparable. But still, that doesn't mean, Krishna does satisfy, because conjugal affection is also one of the moods. There is parental affection, right? There is servitorship, and Krishna does satisfy it, and there are devotees in that mood, and so they can all coexist. But sometimes there are situations where such feelings are manifested by arrangement of Yoga Maya, just for certain kind of rasas to emerge and intensify the love between the lover and the beloved. So this is kind of a broad overview. I don't know if that answers your question in terms of how it can coexist.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions anyone has? Okay, so we'll begin with verse 61. Tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita mata paraha vasehi yasyendriyani tasya pragya pratisthita. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: one who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, fixes his consciousness upon me, and fixes his consciousness upon me, is known as a man of steady intelligence. So here's an important point, because somebody might apply different yogic practices to control one's senses. But then if after doing that, if one does not fix the consciousness on Krishna, right, then it's very difficult, for the intelligence to be steady. But when one does that, then that man is known as a man of steady intelligence. In one of the previous verses that we discussed last time, Srila Prabhupada gives the example of Vishwamitra. So Vishwamitra, he was such a advanced yogi, but because he was not a devotee, just when Menka was sent, he was allured just by the tinkling of the bells of the Apsara, and he was agitated. So unless one is engaged in a positive engagement, these senses cannot be artificially controlled. So here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning the highest conception of yoga perfection is Krishna consciousness, right? So that is mentioned over here. See here, matta paraha is very important, right? In relationship with me. So this me means Krishna is speaking. So that's where Krishna consciousness comes. Unless one is Krishna conscious, it is not possible to control the senses. So that was the example of Vishwamitra that was given. Here's another example. In the pastime of Durvasa Muni, who picked up a quarrel with Maharaj Ambarish. So Durvasa Muni's characteristic is that he gets angered very easily, right? Durvasa means everyone wants to have Vasa dur from him. That means Vasa means association or living. Dur means far away. So as soon as people, that's what it literally means. You don't want to get close to Durvasa Muni. You can be angered very easily. And once he's angered, he might, curse you, or, he's a powerful sage after all. So he has this habit of picking up fights. Now he picked up a fight one time with Maharaj Ambarish, who is a pure devotee of Krishna. And that did not go very well. So Durvasa Muni unnecessarily became angry out of pride and therefore could not check his senses. Right? He was agitated, he was offended. That means he is not in the control of his senses. On the other hand, the king, even though when he was not so powerful as a yogi, the sage, and when he was spoken harsh words by Durvasa Muni and cursed, or about to be cursed, he was not disturbed at all. That means he had subdued his senses. So he silently tolerated all the sages' injustice, thereby emerged victorious. The king was able to control his senses because of the following qualifications. This is the quotation from the 9th canto, 4th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. So I'll just read the translation. It says, King Ambarish fixed his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, engaged his words in describing the abode of the Lord, his hands in cleansing the temple of the Lord, his ears in hearing the pastimes of the Lord, his eyes in seeing the form of the Lord, his body in touching the body of the devotee, his nostrils in smelling the flavors of the flowers which were offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, his tongue in tasting the tulsi leaves offered to him, his legs in traveling the holy places where his temple is situated, his head in offering obeisances unto the Lord, and his desires in fulfilling the desires of the Lord. And all these qualifications made him fit to become Mata Para devotee. So here we see Maharaj Ambarish, he engaged all his senses positively in the service of the Lord. So he developed that higher taste. So here he says Matta Paraha. See, how do you? Matta Paraha means in the relationship with me. So that's Prabhupada is using that word. Right? He's saying Matta Para devotees. That means he is an unalloyed devotee who is fully surrendered to the Supreme Lord. He's engaging all his senses. So the word Matta Para is most significant in this connection. How can one become Matta Para like Maharaj Ambarish? So there's another Acharya, Baladev Vidyabhushan, and I think we talked about him in the beginning of our series of classes, right? Srila Prabhupada dedicates this commentary to Baladev Vidyabhushan. He's a great Acharya in the Gaudiya line, Sampradaya, and he had written the Govinda Bhashya commentary. So Srila Prabhupada is quoting him once again here. So Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan has commented, Matta Bhakti Prabhavena Sarvendriya Vijaya Purvika Svatma Drishtisu Labeti Bhavaha. The senses can be completely controlled only by the strength of devotional service to Krishna. It cannot be artificially controlled. Also, the example of fire is given sometimes. A blazing fire burns everything within a room. Lord Vishnu, similarly, is situated in the heart of the yogi, burns up all kind of impurities. The Yoga Sutras also prescribe meditation on the Vishnu, not meditation on the void. So this is the subtle detail that not many are familiar. Just like you go to the yoga studios, especially here in the West, and or if you read an commentary or the history of yoga in the West, they say that, well, the yoga was democratized, or they try to say that yoga was made secular. That means yoga was able to flourish so much when it was disconnected from its spiritual underpinnings. And so that's why if someone goes to learn yoga, they do not tell that the ultimate purpose of the yogas is also eventually to meditate on Vishnu, right? But they remove Vishnu because they think, oh, this is sectarian, right? Of course, Vishnu is not sectarian, right? If we read the characteristics of Vishnu, he makes no distinction between devotees and non-devotees, right? He does not make any. So the dualities are created by us, and he is equal to everyone. So there is no question of being sectarian. So the meditation on void is not the purpose, right? Sometimes the yoga also engages in meditation, but what do they meditate on? Voidness. Well, that's not meditation. So Yoga Sutra, Srila Prabhupada is quoting over here. Ultimately, they also prescribe meditation on Vishnu, but is not taught, or people are ignorant about it. The so-called yogis who meditate on something other than Vishnu form simply waste their time in a vain search for phantasmagoria. So it's just like, something illusory, does not have any existence. So we have to be Krishna conscious, devoted to the personality of Godhead. This is the aim of real yoga. Any questions on verse number 61? No? Okay. Okay, so now we'll go into a series of verses, very, very important verses. You can even memorize it, or at least understand the import of it, and so we can apply that in our life. So this will also answer Maulik's question on, how does anger emerge and how one can, first we need to understand the mechanism, right, before we can address, just like root cause analysis. There's a problem on the assembly line, and you have to see what is causing it, and there might be, there are different frameworks. Like one of the framework is 5 whys. So why, you have to ask the question why 5 times. So why is this happening? A is happening because of B. Why is B happening? B is happening because of C. Why is C happening? Because of D. And when you keep on going in this way, ultimately you will find the root cause. And unless you understand how things are happening, you cannot fix it. So the same concept applies. Dhayato vishayan pumsa sangaste supajayate sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodho vijayate. Translation: while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises. So here a brief description of how, there are a series of steps that need to happen before anger can arise. So the first principle that is mentioned over here is exploited widely by the marketing or the advertising domain of commerce. So this, if somebody takes a degree in advertising, there are institutions that specializes in the part of India that I am from. There is an institute called MICA, MIC. I don't know what it stands for, but it's kind of one of the best colleges if you want to learn the science of advertising. And so there are different forms of advertising. There is content marketing. So it's one. Some of the tactics are really, very, what you call, very direct. There's no hiding. You're just going, hey, buy this product right in, in front of, right in your face. A salesman would try to sell it. But then there are more subtle ways of selling it. And that subtle ways, they are exploiting this understanding that when the senses, they contemplate, they think, they meditate, what happens? One develops attachment, right? So the content marketing is, well, people want to solve problems, and so they might Google and they might, hey, how do I fix this problem? And so they, there's a solution that is provided. Well, this is what you need to do, blah blah blah, and then they would, within that solution, they might recommend, by the way, you might need to use this tool or this sponge, or if you're cleaning something, and they might say, like, I recommend Mr. Clean product or something like that. So a very subtle way. So that's content marketing, right? So so because now how do you catch attention, right? Or the person wants to solve the problem, and within the solution is provided, and within the content, just a word is mentioned, right? So that impacts one's consciousness. There is subliminal marketing, subliminal advertising. That means, in a 30-second advertisement, there might be a frame which does not last more than even 2 seconds or a second, but then they might use certain colors or pictures. The whole idea of it could be used positively way or a negative way, but either way, if there's a message that they want to convey, even that what's the word, subliminal, it's very sublime what it means. It's not, you might not even notice that you're in content marketing, you're noticing it, right? Mr. Clean, it's explicitly mentioned. But subliminal marketing, it's not even explicitly mentioned. It's just a frame that appears and just goes away, but then it still makes an impact on the consciousness. And you might think, like, it's not, I did not even notice, but it did make an impact, right? So it's the science is very subtle, and it could be exploited for good reasons and bad reasons. But the underlying principle is here. Now we are going to talk not in terms of marketing, but we'll see how this can eventually lead to other kind of problems. And so when that kind of messaging is repeatedly enforced, right? You see it on the TV, then you see it on the cell phone, because now they can link devices. So this laptop belongs to Jamin, right? And this cell phone belongs to him. Very personalized targeted marketing. And then you go out and look at the billboard and you see the same message, right? That's why even social changes, when they need to be brought about, all the different, the academia, which is the universities, the entertainment, right? The movies, the TV shows, and the media, which is the news. If all of them try to convey the same message, the same message you are hearing in all these 3 different channels, then people, even if it is false, people will start accepting that as a truth, right? Because, hey, and it is all subliminal. They're not saying it explicitly, but you're saying, oh, I see, same message, it's reinforced, right? And what happens is it makes an impact. So now when that is used to sell something, then attachment develops, right? And from attachment, eventually the lust develops, and I really want this. I cannot live without it. And when that lust is not fulfilled, then one becomes angry, right? Sometimes we see unfortunate incidences where 2 children, they are just fighting over maybe a game, like a video game, or could be anything, and like they badly injure each other, right? No, I want this, or this is mine. And sometimes even there is death, right? So again, these are extreme examples, but the idea of when one associates too much with sense objects, even just contemplates, right, then it leads to all this series of actions that follow. Okay, so let's see what Srila Prabhupada says. So here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that one who is not Krishna conscious is subjected to material desires while contemplating the objects of the senses. The senses, they require real engagements. You cannot artificially suppress the needs of the senses. If they are not engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, they will certainly seek engagement in the service of materialism, right? So you cannot be neutral. If you're not positively engaged, just like the child, if it's not positively engaged, it's going to do destruction. But it cannot sit quietly. It needs to be, the child needs to be engaged, right? The same thing, the senses, they need to be engaged, but if they're not engaged in the service of the Lord, then they would will indulge in sense gratification. In material world, everyone, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, what to speak about other demigods, they are all subjected to the influence of sense objects, right? So the devas, the 33, what is 33, yeah, 33 million demigods and demigoddesses. So these are positions which are awarded to manage the affairs of the material universe to individuals who have pious credits from previous life, right? And so they have a longer life, better body, better senses to engage in different kind of pleasures. But ultimately, they are still within the three modes of nature. And so they are not free from the desire for sense enjoyment. The only method to get out of this puzzle of material existence is to become Krishna conscious. So this is a maze, right? The maze is pretty wide and deep. It spans across the entire material universe. It's impossible to get out of it unless one engages in positive devotion to the Lord. So Lord Shiva was in deep meditation when Parvati agitated him for sense pleasures. Another example that's given. He agreed to the proposal and Kartikeya was born. So Kartikeya is the first son of Shiva and Parvati. Now Haridas Thakur, we see this in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. So Haridas Thakur, he is Brahma himself actually. He is born as Haridas Thakur. So what happened in Krishna Leela, Brahma once, in order to, though Brahma and all the demigods invited Vishnu to appear, because the things on earth were unbearable. So Vishnu promises, okay, I'm going to appear. And then he comes as Krishna, but because he comes as an ordinary cowherd boy, even Brahma is bewildered. Who is this child? So he wanted to test Krishna. So what he does, he kidnaps all the gopas and the calves for 1 year. And Krishna, what he does, he expands himself into exact form of the gopas which were kidnapped by Brahma. And so much so that their even parents could not recognize them, and rather they had more affection toward their children. Similarly, the cows, they had more affection to the calves, but they are all Krishna's expansions. And Brahma realizes his mistake. He says, this, no one can do it, even I cannot do it. So then he apologizes and he says that because I misbehaved, I want to do special service to you. So when you appear in Kali Yuga as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I will purposely take birth in a outside of the Vedic Varnashram Dharma, not in the Varnashram society, and I'll dedicate myself to your service. So that is Haridas Thakur. He is born in a Muslim family. So the Muslims, they are not part of the Varnashram system. But then he takes up the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So Haridas Thakur is a Namacharya. He used to chant 300,000 names of the Lord every single day. So that means if you chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra, that's what he used to chant on his beads. It would probably take 22 hours to chant 300,000 names, but he was always chanting. So he's known as Namacharya. So in order to defame him, because the Hindus, the caste Brahmanas, they did not like him. He says, who is this? He's a Muslim by birth, and he is also introducing all these things, so they were kind of felt threatened. So they sent a prostitute to Haridas Thakur, and they want to, so that they were hoping that Haridas Thakur indulges in enjoyment with her, and so then they can broadcast that, hey, see, this is a hypocrite. He calls himself a big sadhu, but he is the most degraded of all. So when that prostitute approaches Haridas Thakur knows what's happening. So he says, yo, you come over here. So the prostitute makes her proposal. He says, you are a young man, you should enjoy with me. So Haridas Thakur says, okay, I'll fulfill your desire, but you know what to do. I have taken this vow that I have to chant 300,000 names of the Lord every day. So let me finish my chanting and then I'll fulfill your desires. Why don't you just sit over here? So he's sitting outside in the courtyard. Haridas Thakur is chanting. 22 hours means all night kind of goes. So by early morning, he finishes round. He says, I finished my rounds, but it's already morning. Why don't you come again tomorrow? So the prostitute again comes back the next day. So this continues for 3 days. And by the third night, the pure chanting of a pure devotee has such an impact, then the prostitute realizes her mistake. You see, actually started chanting in her mind. And then she tells why she had come, and she apologizes for it. And then Haridas Thakur says, no worries. Now, you have understood. So you take up the chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. He says, you always worship Tulsi. And so in this way, Haridas Thakur is not agitated. Why? Because he's fixed in devotion. Of course, Lord Shiva is not ordinary. This is just an example that's given. Lord Shiva is Vishnu's expansion in the mode of passion and ignorance. Of course, that doesn't mean that he is under the influence of ignorance. Just like an ordinary conditioned soul, his position is special. So we should. He is not a Jiva Tattva. Brahma is Jiva Tattva. That means a soul. But Shiva is a special category. He's neither Vishnu Tattva nor Jiva Tattva. He's different. Lord Shiva is also a great devotee. So again, we should not underestimate. But the example is given just to illustrate the power of the chanting of names of the Lord in pure devotion. There is a Vaishnava Sampradaya. Of the 4 Sampradayas, one of the Sampradayas, Rudra Sampradaya, is led by Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva himself is always meditating and chanting the names of Lord Vishnu. So sometimes such pastimes occur just to kind of set an example. That doesn't mean Lord Shiva is any inferior or fallen. So as illustrated in the above mentioned verse, Sri Yamunacharya, a sincere devotee of the Lord, shuns all material sense enjoyment due to higher taste of spiritual enjoyment in the association of the Lord. So that's a verse that we read in our last class, where Yamunacharya, he's saying as a king, he used to enjoy different kind of sensual pleasures, especially with women. But having taken to pure devotional service, having developed that higher taste, he would think that how did I even engage in such lower modes earlier? So that only we can theoretically understand, but those who have experienced that higher taste, they can really appreciate, because that positive range of experience is known to them. And so other engagements are very distasteful. So that's what Srila Prabhupada is quoting over here. One who is not therefore in Krishna consciousness, however powerful he may be in controlling the senses by artificial repression, like Vishwamitra, is surely ultimately to fail. For slightest thought of sense pleasure will agitate him to gratify his senses. So give the example of Vishwamitra. He did not see Menka. He was meditating. But what did he hear? He heard the ghungru, the payal, the ankle bell that Menka was wearing, and she started dancing, in the same place where Vishwamitra was meditating. But the melody of she was the sound made by the ankle bells that she was dancing reminded Vishwamitra of the Apsaras, and he thought, oh, this is enjoyment that I could pursue. And so he was agitated. On the other hand, one who is a devotee, especially devotee of Lord Gauranga, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also himself used to wear ankle bells and he used to dance the names of Krishna in his Nagar Sankirtan. So it shows the consciousness of the individual, because if one is situated in the pure consciousness, hearing the tinkling of the ankle bells, one might have been reminded of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? Or the devotees of the Lord who dance. But when the consciousness or the mind is contemplating on sense enjoyment, as we discussed earlier, right, in the previous verse, it says, when the taste for, though the senses are physically restrained from sense object, because a taste remains, right, even a slight impetus that or agitation might deviate one. But if the consciousness is pure, if the mind is pure, right? So when hearing the tinkling bell, wouldn't remind one of the dancing girls, right? It would remind one of the Nartaka Gauranga, the dancing form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So how we Jaisi Drishti Vaisi Srishti, the world appears to us the way our consciousness is, right? And so one needs to purify one's consciousness and mind. Any questions on verse number 62? Okay, verse number 63. Krodad bhavati sammoha sammohat smriti vibramah smriti vrimshad buddhinaso buddhinasat pranashyati. So what happens? In the previous verse we say, well, contemplating on sense objects leads to attachment. From attachment, when it becomes strong, it becomes lust, and when that lust is not fulfilled, the desire is not fulfilled, right, anger comes. Now what's the next step? So now the anger has come. Now when one is overpowered by anger, what is going to happen? Well, from anger, delusion arises. So when people are angry, they have no sense of what they are doing. They would say things that they would otherwise would have never said. They might do things. They might hurt their own self. They might hurt others. Right? And so they are deluded. They have lost all sense of what is right, what is wrong. From delusion, bewilderment of memory arises, right? So what happens is, memory also is a function. We learn from our past experiences, right? And then any time when we are deliberating and intelligently taking decisions, then we try to recall our past experiences from our memory. In the past, in my life, when I did this happened, maybe I should not do this. Or it could be somebody else's experiences that we might have observed, or in this situation, or could be scriptures, or there are so many pastimes in Puranas are described, and we might take inspiration from those situations. That's why in the earlier days, we always used to quote, on a given scenario, how to behave. They would say, oh, in this scripture, in this scenario, this person acted this way. If the outcome was good, then we should follow. If the outcome was bad, we should not follow, right? So they're taking inspiration from scriptural stories, or could be from personal experience, could be the experience of friends or family members. But that memory has a purpose. And then what is the purpose? Well, it has lessons, it has teachings. That's why history. Why do they teach history? Well, there are many reasons why they teach history. I mean, one is indoctrination, right? If the same history, especially if there are bitter enemies, neighboring countries like Pakistan, India, they have a common history to some extent, but then it is tainted because they have a political agenda. So that's why if you see a generation born way after Pakistan's independence, or Pakistan and India's independence, but because of the indoctrination of how things are and what we hear, there is no reason for Indians to have enmity towards the Pakistanis, but right from childhood, kind of ingrained, right? So there's a lot of history is tainted, but the real reason for learning history is to know and understand the failures and the patterns and the successes and the time cycles in which history repeats itself, and we can learn from history so we can avoid those mistakes. Similarly, so that's on a larger scale, at the scale of society, but at a personal level, we could use from our memory of past experiences, we can decide what is right or wrong. But what happens when one is angry, right? Delusion and bewilderment of memory happens, right? And so then one cannot draw from past learnings. And what happens when memory is bewildered? Intelligence is lost. Now intelligence has no learnings it can draw. It's discrimination, right? And when intelligence is lost, what happens? One falls down again in the material pool. That means it will do things which are not worthy of doing, right? And in extreme cases, one can kill one's beloved, and only after they realize, this was in the fist of anger I did. But only after the anger subsides, they realize what that happened. They might have killed a close family member. Sometimes they might have done activities which would be outright criminal, and there's so many other implications, and the whole life is wasted just because in that moment one was not able to control the fist of anger. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is quoting Srila Rupa Goswami on Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu. By development of Krishna consciousness, one can know that everything has its use in the service of the Lord. Those who are without knowledge of Krishna consciousness artificially try to avoid material objects. As a result, although they desire liberation from material bondage, they do not attain the perfect stage of renunciation. So this is called Falgu Vairagya, false renunciation. Falgu means less important. On the other hand, person who is a devotee, who is Krishna conscious, knows how to engage everything in the service of the Lord, even anger. Therefore, he does not become victim of material consciousness. For example, an impersonalist. For an impersonalist, the Lord or the Absolute is not a person, and so he cannot eat. This is not a person. Whereas an impersonalist tries to avoid the good eatables, right? Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, everything is false, right? So it says they shun everything. I'm not going to eat, live a very austere life, which is good. In one sense, is definitely good. But the positive engagement, the devotee thinks, well, Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. So though I am not the enjoyer, Krishna is the enjoyer. So I have to make eatables and offer it to him. And if I eat those food offerings as a remnant, that's the important point, as a remnant, then it becomes prasadam, in the sense that one eats with the consciousness, oh, this is leftover eaten by someone, but this is not an ordinary person. That someone is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When we eat those remnants in that consciousness, because you eat the leftovers from someone's plate, is when one's taking a very humble position. Typically, no one would do that except if somebody is extremely poor and no food, right? So that poverty has made that individual humble, right? And says, okay, whatever food you give, in whatever form you will give, I'll accept, right? So when one really develops that consciousness of being so insignificant, and when he's eating or honoring, that's why we don't say eating, we say honoring the remnants of the Lord, then it helps one make advancement. But if one devours the offerings to the Lord in order to enjoy and still gratifies one's tongue, then it really does not make much spiritual advancement. It doesn't help much make spiritual advancement. So the leftovers, at least it's some effect. Well, somebody is taking the remnants, but they're not taking it in proper consciousness. So that consciousness is very important, because everything can be spiritualized, right? And when everything is spiritualized, there is no danger of downfall. The devotee takes prasadam in Krishna consciousness, whereas a non-devotee rejects it as material. You see, oh, this is very luxurious food, I'm not going to eat, right? Rather, if the luxurious food is first offered to the Lord, then it should be made in the consciousness for Lord's enjoyment, not to think, oh, I like to eat this, I like to eat gulab jamun. So the real desire is I want to make something that I like for my own enjoyment, and I'll offer it to the Lord. Well, in the beginning stages, I think at least it's a progress. Instead of not offering at all, we have our own attachments, and so it's okay. I think you like to eat something, okay, but after we cook, we offer it to the Lord, right? So I'm not free from it. I have my own shortcomings, and so I don't have that advanced realization that I'm always, anything is prepared, I'm exclusively thinking about Krishna. But the process is given. When we are slowly, by practice, eventually we'll develop that consciousness or attitude while we are putting Krishna's pleasure first, right? And then when the food is offered in that fashion, and whatever the remnants are there, we take it in proper consciousness, then that prasadam helps us make spiritual advancement. The impersonalist therefore cannot enjoy life, right? So if you look at the life, means because one is artificially restraining the senses. So it's a very austere life, right? And it's tasteless. And it's not sustainable. Right? We've seen so many examples, like even Vishwamitra, right? So it could go on for many decades or centuries by his mystic power, extreme tapasya, but then with a slight agitation, one can immediately fall down. So slight agitation of the mind pulls him down again in the pool of material existence. It is said that such a soul, even though rising up to the point of liberation, Brahma Jyoti, beyond the coverings of the material universe, is prone to fall down again because it has not experienced the positive service, positive devotional service of the Lord. Any questions on verse 63? Yes.
So I have a question. So you talked about anger, and well, I would say like anger is one of those things where we've gone through. Many of us have lived like quite a lot of our life, right? And there is anger that comes and goes, right? And as you become aware, right, I think it's like controlling the anger from now on is very different than anger that you expressed in the past, and um, and I think it's kind of its impact on how you look at spiritual progression, on your actions in the past and what you've done, right? And now it's like from once you know, it's very different when you were not aware and your actions and how that impacts your spiritual advancements. I'd love to understand.
Right. So I'll rephrase the question just to make sure I understood it right. So the premise is that we can by evaluating how better we are able to control our anger over a period of time, right? When you compare the present to the past, and that becomes a metric by which we can sort of assess how much spiritual advancement we have made, how better we are able to control. Is that the question? If we could use that as a proxy for gauging our spiritual advancement, is that the question you're asking?
Well, no. I think the question I was asking is there are actions in the past that you've done in ignorance, let's say, right? And at the time, the awareness wasn't there, the enlightenment wasn't there, right? So there was a whole bunch of actions that have been performed in the past, right? And I've been kind of as I attend Gita classes, I've been kind of thinking back over my life, right, and all the things that I've done that were either right or not, right? And as you think about anger, it kind of comes to mind because as you think about children, I have young children, right? And I get angry for lots of different reasons, and I always wonder what the impact of that is once you know what the right thing to do is, right? All of the times that you've taken an action that was maybe wrong or maybe that was incorrect, right? And how do you now move forward knowing what you've done with the learnings that you have moving forward?
Right. So, I mean, what has happened in the past, again, the past cannot be changed, but the past also has learnings in the sense that what we could do is as we go through this learnings from Bhagavad Gita, especially this particular section, which is explaining the mechanism, provides as a framework, by which we could do a root cause analysis. Then we could apply that root cause analysis to specific incidents in our life where we might have engaged in a fist of anger and the outcome again was not very good, and we lamented that outcome in the hindsight. And so this is kind of applying the theory to a case study, and so it helps us reinforce our learnings, and then we can say that, hey, if I had applied this framework in that situation, and if I could avoid that scenario, then it would have really helped us or helped me, right, in that particular situation. And so your conviction, you're practically trying to apply the theory to that historical situation and then think how that outcome would have been different. Or even before that, would this framework have helped me control my anger, right? So one is, if you know the mechanism, then you can stop it. You need to, should I stop at stage 1, stage 2, stage 3?
Yeah.
Like you can stop anger at multiple stages, right? So
Right.
I can give an example specifically, but am I going in the right?
Yeah. Yes. I think you answered my question, which was my main thing. But yes, go ahead and give me an example. But I think you answered my question already.
Right. So say there is a scenario where I unnecessarily expressed anger towards a good friend of mine, right? And if I try to reevaluate that situation, then I can start from the last stage and go back. So why am I lamenting? First of all, the reason I'm lamenting again is because the outcome was not good, so I fell down in the material pool, right? I mean, it's an abominable thing that I did, which is I realized only at a later point in time. And then I said, why I did that? Why did I lost my discrimination? I have the discrimination right now, but I lost that discrimination. Why did I say those harsh words to a friend? Right? Maybe the friend was asking for some help, right? Some money, maybe, right? And I, instead of just saying no, I could have gently told him, my situation is not good right now, or I cannot help. But I felt that maybe he's trying to unnecessarily take undue advantage of me, and so I thought I need to teach him a lesson. Could have avoided using harsh words, though at that moment I felt that justified, because he's taking undue advantage of me because of my kindness from past experiences, of our past interactions. So maybe I spoke harsh words, right? But if I had avoided it, I lost intelligence at that point in time. Why did that happen? Why was I deluded? Because I became angry. Why did I become angry, right? So if I then go back to the previous verse, well, anger then comes from lust, right? When lust was not fulfilled. So what was the lust that I had in that scenario? Well, in that case, the idea was that why I should let myself be taken undue advantage of, and how can that person even think of it? So of course we don't want people to take undue advantage of us, but what really affected my ego says that this person thinks that I'm such a disposable person that you can misuse or take advantage of our relationship. And so that ego, why did that ego come? Because I think very highly of myself, right? Because I think I'm such an important person, because I have developed an attachment with my position in the society, the wealth or the knowledge, right? And so I think I'm important. And why did again that happen? Because I am paying more attention to things that I have. I'm contemplating on those things instead of contemplating on the greatness of the Lord. Whatever little knowledge I have, it's incomparable compared to the knowledge that Krishna has. Whatever little position, I might think I am a very important person, or a position in my company, but that's nothing. The company did not exist 15 years ago, right? Krishna is the Lord of the entire universe, Jagannath, which has been it's eternal, the material creation, manifest and manifest. So so now I can apply that framework. And because I was not properly situated in Krishna consciousness, I was not, I was giving overemphasis on my sense of identity, and that cannot be allowed to be, offended. And that led to that situation. So I just gave one example, right? But you can apply this framework, and then just like anything if when somebody goes an MBA class, many times they quote historical examples, maybe a century old or decades old, and apply that theory, like and then see what happened in that scenario. Some of them are success stories, some of them are failure stories, but we learn from there. And so we could apply this theory and look at our past experiences, and then see if we had understood that theory, if we knew how anger actually develops, what are the reasons, then could we have stopped it, right? And how we looked at it in proper perspective. I think that's an exercise that we could do.
No, thank you. Thank you. So going back to the question that you did interpret it as, because I'm curious about that too, when you think about what your past actions, the current learnings, and how to perceive that as an advancement or a spiritual advancement, right? Which is a question that you thought I had asked in the first place. I'm curious on what your answer would be to that.
Okay. So, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is a spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, he said that everyone in this world is my teacher. Some people teach me what to do. Other people, they teach me what not to do. So, even intelligent people who have not studied scriptures, they know that, you should not let go any failure in vain. What it means is that as long as we learn from our mistakes and improve ourselves, that failure is not really a failure, right? But if we don't learn from our mistakes, then we have let go on a good opportunity. And so sometimes of course, a first class person does not need to wait until to make mistakes before that person learns. First class learning is just learning from hearing. A child, if it just listens to the parents, right, and then acts accordingly, then that is perfect learning. One doesn't have to go through suffering before one learns. Or reading from scriptures. Scriptures say this is how one should behave. One has that conviction, and they would avoid such kind of behavior, right? So that's a first class learning. But for majority of people, we learn only after making mistakes. Now the positive side of that is if we really analyze our mistakes and then try to learn from it, then we apply the scriptural learnings to those mistakes, right? Like this framework we apply to past mistakes and like try to understand what happened. So now the learning that we got is more stronger than the learning that one gets simply from instruction, right? Because experience is the best teacher if one attempts to learn from it. Otherwise, people go through so many failures but then never improve, so that really does not help. But now we have learnings from scriptures, the theory from scriptures applied to practical experiences of the past, and then that learning becomes much stronger, right? Because now there's an application. That's why again, management sciences, they don't talk about theory. Why? There are case studies. And the best students for MBA programs are not, if somebody might do a bachelor's program and then they just go and do an MBA, even from a prestigious school, their learning won't be as steep or as strong as someone who has 15 years of experience in industry, 20 years of experience, and they're bringing that perspective when they're taking those management courses. That vast experiences is what they can relate to when the theory is taught. Even they can think of all their past experiences and challenges they faced in managing the business, and so their learning is strong. That's why when we see, of course, we want to provide the learnings of the shastras to our children right from young age, and let my children, they memorize the slokas from Bhagavad Gita, and they might be able to tell stories, and sometimes they talk about philosophy. There are children who memorize all the slokas, but that person is still a child and does not have the learnings, the hard knocks of life the child has not experienced. And so the learning of a child, though the child might be able to speak so much philosophy, if it's trained, is not so deep, and it's not as mature, and it's not ingrained so much as someone who as an adult. Sometimes people start reading Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam at much advanced stage, but they have the entire experiences of their entire lifespan, right, that they can bring to when they are studying Bhagavad Gita. And so there is a difference in learning. And so that's why the hard knocks of the life, they teach us in many ways if we are open to learning from those mistakes. Just a second. Does that help answer?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So that's why they say experience is the best teacher. Well, as long as one is willing to learn. So if we are able to apply learning, I mean, if we have the theory from scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and then we have real life experiences, so that's a very powerful combination to really have that strong learning and apply it in our life. Okay, sorry about that. So we have about 9 minutes. I think we could, let's see, at least we could do one more verse, 64. Yeah, I think we could probably do one or two verses. Verse 64. Ragadvesha vimuktais vishayan indriyais charan atma vashyir videyatma prasadam adhigacchati. Translation. But a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. It's a very powerful verse. There's a lot to unpack in this actually. Srila Prabhupada, first of all, is mentioning raga, dvesha, attachment and detachment. One has to be free from attachment and detachment both. You see, sometimes people think we have to be detached from everything. Well, attachment and detachment, they are two sides of the same coin. A real devotee, he knows the purpose of everything, right? Even we talked about emotions can be engaged in the service of the Lord. So one has to be free from both raga and dvesha, right? Both can not in the sense of being neutral, but the fact that everything has a purpose. And then he says, and in this way one can control the senses, just like one has to learn how to control happiness to be able to learn to control distress, right? They're two sides of the same coin. And vimuktai, that means one has to become free, right? Become free. Visayan, sense objects, indriya, senses. So Srila Prabhupada translates this as one is able to control the senses, right? Control the senses means engagement of the senses with sense objects is happening under one's choice, under one's own prerogative, not that one is drawn by the impulse of the sense objects. The sense objects are not in the control, right? One who is self-realized, the person himself is in the control, and within one's control, externally there might be attachment in one's action. Externally there might be detachment sometimes. But when the person is in control, he knows what he's doing. The self-realized soul is actually using these different engagements of either attachment or detachment in the service of the Lord. And that is real freedom, right? So in America, the whole idea is about, everyone is free. The freedom, the land of the free, the home of the brave, right? So the emphasis on freedom is that, well, everyone should have the freedom to do whatever they like, right? And they have some parameters as long as you cannot hurt others. Well, but hurt others means they're limiting. It's a humanistic idea in the sense that as long as you don't hurt other humans. Of course, other animals could be exploited to satisfy one's tongue or other perversions, but so they define some boundaries, and it sounds very noble. But what is it? The idea to let the senses engage in whatever they desire is not freedom. That is enslavement. One is a slave of one's senses. You see, they think it's freedom. I like, hey, there's pandemic going on, and I should have the freedom to not wear masks, right? Right. I should have freedom to do whatever I like. So that is not freedom. One is actually I should have freedom to eat whatever I like. My tongue, that's why you have all the kind of things which are not worthy of eating, but because it titillates the tongue, they find some enjoyment, to indulge in that. So all these senses, the allowing senses to do whatever they like, that's not freedom. That's enslavement. So the freedom is defined over here. Vi muktai hai. Mukta. Like those who know Indic languages, mukta is a common word. Freedom. Vi muktaha. There's an extra emphasis on it. So real freedom is one is able to control the senses, not allow the senses to indulge in sense objectment. That is real freedom. Right. So through regulative principles of freedom. Why is it called regulative principle? Means it's not that one does not engage the senses with sense objects all the time. It's not that the senses are completely restricted from engaging with the sense object. Rather, the senses engage with the sense object according to regulative principles where the person is in charge. It's not being affected by the impulse of the sense object. The person is in control, just like a driver of the chariot is able to control the horses. It's not that the driver has stopped engaging with the horses, right? That's not what is recommended. Driver should engage with the horses, but he should be in the control, not that the horses are pulling the driver. So driver is holding the reins, but then the horses are not in its control, right? Then the chariot might go this way or that way, it will go in any way, right? So the engagement cannot be stopped, but it has to be regulated. Principles of freedom. Freedom means, what is the real freedom of the driver? Right? Real freedom of the driver is that the driver has the control over the horses. If the horses have control over the driver, then that's not freedom. Right? But that's what's happening. People, what they call freedom, they think it's freedom. I can do whatever. It's not. The person is acting according to the urges of the senses. Is go dasa. We don't have to be go. Go means senses. Dasa is a servant. We have to become Goswamis. We don't have to become go dasa. So there's a lot to unpack, and this is very deep. This particular verse. So a person who is free from attachment and aversion, and is able to control one's senses through regulative principles of freedom, can obtain the mercy. This can really attract the mercy of the Lord, right? So one doesn't need to be a pandit or master of, expert in all scriptures. One need not be, a great singer who can sing nice songs in glorification of the Lord. Of course, those qualities are there. Then they can also be engaged in the service of the Lord, right? As everything can be engaged. So again, we are not dvesha, we are not detached to it in that sense that they are completely forbidden. But the point is that simply it doesn't take much to invite or attract the mercy of the Lord. All that one needs to do, if one can learn these principles, regulative principles of freedom, where one is not of, is devoid of attachment and aversion and is able to control the senses, just though that kind of life, one might not become famous. The purpose of life is not to become famous as a great devotee of the Lord. The world might not even know us as a devotee of Krishna. But Krishna is making a note of us. If we are able to apply these principles of being free from attachment and aversion, and that actually invites the mercy of the Lord. Prasadam is the mercy. Adhigachati, one attains. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions, it is already explained that one may externally control the senses by an artificial process. But unless the senses are engaged in transcendental service of the Lord, there is an every chance of falling down. Although the person in full Krishna consciousness may apparently be on a sensual plane, very important. He might apparently be on a sensual plane because of his being Krishna conscious. He has no attachment to the activities of the Lord. So externally, this person might appear just like an other ordinary person. Oh, he works, he has a family, he is doing same apparently mundane things as I am doing. But what is the difference? The difference is in consciousness. The person is in charge. Person is engaging the senses with sense object, but is not impelled by the sense objects. Rather, he is able to control the senses and is engaging with sense objects under regulative principles, where the person is fully in charge of one's activities. I'll give another example. I was just, Seattle, we had a lot of snow today. And then I live on a highlands where, there are a lot of rolling hills. Well, all of Seattle, there's a lot of rolling hills. And the slope today, there's some kids, they were sledding down, right? I was talking with my wife and it's like, looks so dangerous. What if they, go off the sidewalk and come down on the road and their cars still coming though, despite of the snow. And well, what is the difference? Again, the same example of chariot or the chariot driver. Well, externally, there could be two individuals who are sliding down the slope, but in one case, the one person is in control of the sled. In other case, the person is not in the control of the sled, right? So here, externally, a Krishna conscious person might appear just like any other ordinary person. He's engaging with the sense objects, but what is the difference? He is not impelled by the sensual impulses. He's not on a sensual plane. See, that's why Srila Prabhupada is saying apparently on a sensual plane. Right? But he has no attachment to the sensual activities. That means he's not impelled by the sensual activities. He's engaging as a matter of duty, and he's in charge, and he's a Goswami. Goswami does not stop engaging with the senses. Goswami continues to engage with the senses, but Goswami is categorically different from a Godas. A Godas is impelled by those sensual impulses. A Krishna conscious person is concerned only with the satisfaction of Krishna and nothing else. Therefore, he is transcendental to all attachment and detachment. If Krishna wants, the devotee can do anything which is ordinarily undesirable. So, the worldly considerations of morality or immorality are also overlooked by pure devotees, not recommended for everyone. But which is ordinarily undesirable, just like the gopis who are pure devotees, to be engaged in an extramarital relationship is ordinarily undesirable, right? But their case is very special, right? They don't have any lust, but they simply want to satisfy Krishna. And so if Krishna does not want, then he shall not do that which he would have ordinarily done for his own satisfaction. So what's the flip side of it? Flip side of it, well, something is approved by Shastra, is approved by the moral principles. But if that does not have any utility in serving Krishna, then even that one might not engage in. Now this is someone who is completely on a transcendental plane, right? On a akarma or a niskam karma platform. Otherwise, for those who are sadhak devotees, so talk about myself, is still practicing, one should still act within the jurisdiction of moral boundaries and within the prescribed regulations according to one's varna and ashram. Right? So one should not artificially try to overcome or not follow the injunctions. But one who is fully self-realized, who have achieved that stage, for such a person, you can act without any restriction, because that individual has no other intention or purpose except to serve Krishna. So this consciousness is the causeless mercy of the Lord, which a devotee can achieve in spite of being attached to the sensual platform. Let's read that again. This consciousness is the causeless mercy of the Lord, which a devotee can achieve in spite of his being attached to the sensual platform. So here, attached in the sensual platform, I think he means that he's engaged on a sensual platform. It doesn't mean that one is attached to sensual enjoyment. He's still acting on that sensual platform. So he's apparently on the sensual plane. That's what it means. Any questions on this particular verse? It's verse number 64. Okay. Okay, there are no questions. I think we can take a break. It's already 6:34, and I do need to upload now 3 successive classes, so I'll do that tonight, and then we'll continue our discussion in our next class. So I think how close are we? Should be 64. Yeah, it's not very far. I think if we do maybe 2-3 more sessions, and maybe we can complete chapter 2. That's quite a progress. Thank you, everybody. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.